So, in order to get Windows subsystem for Linux working, we can either run this command right here, enable Windows optional feature, online, feature name, Microsoft Windows Subsystem Linux, or if you want to use the user interface, we would come over here, go over to the control panel, we'd click Programs, click Turn Windows Features On or Off, and if you come down here to the bottom, we'll see the Windows Subsystem for Linux. You want to check mark that. Alright, now that that has been enabled, we can go ahead and install Ubuntu. So you can just type it in there and it should bring it up. I already have it installed, but you would have to go to the Microsoft Store and click the link, which would then download Ubuntu, which is free. And it should only take a few minutes to get that going. After it's installed, you can go ahead and open up your shell. And at the very beginning, you will be prompted to enter a username as well as a password. And you will have to repeat that password. Now make sure that you remember whatever it is the password that you're going to be entering, as we will be using sudo commands and it will be necessary to verify that you are in fact the administrator. Okay, so just a little very brief intro. If we want to say print our working directory, you just use the pwd. We can see that we are in the home directory of our Linux, and we are using the admin name of sbart. So in order to see what's in our folder, we can go ahead and say ls ls-a, and now you can see that these are all of the files that are within our home directory. So, first thing we want to do is we need to do some updates and just make sure that everything has been up to date here with our new installation of Ubuntu. So in order to do that, we want to go ahead and run sudo apt update, and we also want to do an upgrade, sudo apt upgrade. Here I'm prompted for my password, and now we're going to go ahead and do our update there. Alright, as you can see, I didn't have anything newly installed as I've already done these steps, but I have not completed the entire process yet. I just figured I would let you guys join in on the fun here. Okay. So now, to kind of showcase what is so nice about using Ubuntu on Windows is that we actually have full access to our Windows files. And in order to access our Windows files, we would just simply say ls, it's going to be /mnt/c. Here, now I can see all of my folders that are within my C directory. And what I had done is I went ahead and I created a folder called Airflow. That's right there. And later I'll be setting an environment variable so that when I can access all of the code and stuff that I'm going to be storing in there. So I can go ahead, I can write code in Windows, and then I can later run it with Linux. Alright, so now that I've kind of shown how we can access our Windows files, I just want to go ahead and jump into the Python portion of it. So I just want to make sure that Python is actually installed. I meant to do Python 3. Alright, so I do have Python 3.6.8 installed, and now I can go ahead and do one more step here. I also want to do a sudo apt update. Alright, looks like all my packages are up to date, and now I also want to do a sudo apt install python 3 pip. Okay, so I do have pip installed, and we are ready to go ahead and let's go ahead and check and make sure that that was installed correctly. We can see now that we have pip version 9.0.1. Alright, great. So far, so good. Next, we want to go ahead and install Apache Airflow. So I could just do a pip3 install Apache Airflow, but in my case, I do actually want to have some dependencies added on there. So let's go ahead and jump over here to the installation of Airflow. And as you can see here, if you go ahead and include some square brackets, you can then include the additional features that you want to include in your Apache Airflow installation. So what we're going to have here is pip install Apache Airflow, Postgres, and S3. So let's go ahead and say pip3. Install Apache Airflow, and then we're going to do just like it says over here. We want Postgres and S3. Okay. Not sure what went wrong there. Did I spell something wrong? Let's say pip3 install Apache Airflow. Alright, there we go. Not sure why that failed. I'll have to check into that and see if maybe that's just something unique to Linux. That's maybe the syntax is a little differently. I'm not quite sure why that didn't work. Now, as you can see, all of our various packages, there's a lot of dependencies that come with Apache Airflow. So this should take a few minutes depending on your internet connection. Now what will happen if you try and install this on Windows is you will get, well in my case initially I got the Microsoft Visual C++ version 14 is needed. So I went ahead, I downloaded that, and originally wasn't working. I went back, I installed every single toolkit possible, and then I made it to the next step. But then I ended up running into an issue where it was trying to use the library daemon, and when it would try and import daemon, it would be looking for a password module that is only unique to Linux. So that is where I finally hit my brick wall and decided enough's enough. I'm going to go ahead and use WSL, which is a very nice feature that Windows has added. So you can see here we have all of these various packages that came installed with it. We have the Python daemon, Apache Airflow. I see Flask in there, Flask Babel. Got Jinja 2, NumPy, Pandas, lots of stuff. You will see soon enough, if you haven't made it through this part of the course yet, that Airflow is extremely powerful in the sense that it communicates with a wide variety of external libraries and kind of acts as an intermediary between all of these very powerful data engineering tools. Bear with me while this is installed. Alright, great. Looks like we're good now. Okay, so now that we've got our Apache Airflow installed, what we want to do now is set that environment variable so that when I'm going to be doing CLI commands, it's going to, and then we finally run our Airflow init, it's also going to create all the Airflow stuff in the directory which we pointed to. So as mentioned earlier, we want this to be in the Windows file system, so then you can edit all the files from Windows-based tools. So in order to do this, we're going to go ahead and we're going to run nano, can't type, so nano current directory /bash rc. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to add in a line here. We want to say, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and just put right here. We're going to say export, and we're going to say airflow home equals, and we're going to say /c /airflow. And that's going to point to that directory I showed you earlier that I created called Airflow within my C directory. Now to save this, we just say Control S, and to exit, we hit Control X. Alright. So next step, oddly enough, is we actually have to close Ubuntu and then reopen it. Alright. So now we should have Airflow installed, and we can check that by checking the version. I did not mean to put those dashes there. Permission denied. Lovely. Let me see if I run this as administrator. Okay. Let's go ahead and try and say, looks like what I can try is that initial, the MSNC, MNTC, /MNT/C/Airflow. Let's try this one. Alright, lovely. You know, I just had done this demo right before I started streaming this. I don't know what is going on here. Always issues. Permission denied. Let me open up that nano bash again, and let's see if we get rid of this. It seems like for some reason it is still staying. Let's see here. So, try one more thing here. I don't know if I messed it up. So I want to export Airflow home equal to /mnt /c/airflow. Okay, let's try this. And we want to exit. Try one more time. Alright, great. So unfortunately, I think now for some reason Windows is blocking my access into my C drive. Lovely. Tell you what, guys, so excuse me. Well, now that I've hit this new roadblock, rather than waste your time as I'm trying to figure out why now this is happening, what I'm going to do is we're going to just dive into some examples of running Airflow. I was really hoping that I was going to be able to assist you guys. Hopefully you guys don't run into that same issue if you are trying to do a Windows installation yourself. I will give you guys an update once I figure out what happened there, but let's go ahead and see what we can do now with the working within the workspace. Alright, so let's actually jump up here. We're going to go into exercise number 1, Airflow DAGs, and we'll explain some various concepts of Airflow. So Airflow, what it does is it creates DAGs, which stands for Directional Acyclical Graphs, which you can just think of as a pipeline. Basically, there's a bunch of nodes, and each node is a particular task. So say that it is extracting data off of the internet, and then once you have that data, you would then pass it down the graph to another node, which maybe you would do some transformation, do some data cleaning, and maybe then after that you would then maybe pass it into Tableau or into your database. So each node connects to another node, and you can optimize it in such a way that only certain actions will be done depending on the results of the excuse me, previous node. So just to kind of get a concept here, what we're going to do is we're going to import our DAG here. So from Airflow, import DAG, and then we're going to import the Python operator. So when I was talking about tasks, they are called operators in Airflow. So here we're going to import the Python operator, which allows us to use Python functions, which can then be called as our DAG is working its way through the pipeline. So here I just want to go ahead and define a function. We call it my function, and here we're just saying logging.info hello world. So you could also just do a simple print statement, but in our case we're going to want to have to be able to read our log files, and then we'll actually be able to see that information. Otherwise you wouldn't see anything. Okay, so the DAG definition. So here we have DAG. We're going to set it equal to the DAG method. And then, so the very first thing you want to do when defining a DAG is you name the DAG here. So here we named it lesson1.exercise1. So this is what you could think of as the name or DAG ID. Okay, so another parameter here that we could define is the description, and we'll just say that this is our first DAG. Okay. So next you want to do a start date. So the beauty of Airflow is that we can actually create our data pipelines in a way that they only run on certain schedules. So first we want to do is we want to set a start date. So you could, what I'm doing here is I'm calling datetime.datetime.now, which is creating the actual time on my computer at this very moment. But what we could do is we could actually set the start date to be in the future, or we could actually set the start date to be in the past. And you should see this in a little bit here. So so we have our name or DAG ID, we have a description, and then we have a start date here. So optionally, I'm not going to go into the scheduling yet, we'll just go ahead and keep this as is for now. Okay, so here we're going to go ahead and define our operator. So you can think of these as the task that we want to perform in our DAG. So in order to do so, we say it's equal to a Python operator because we're wanting to call a Python function. So we use the Python operator, and then we have these are the parameters that it expects. So we have a task ID. We're going to go ahead and call it greeting task. Then we provide a Python callable. So a callable just means a function, a method that can be called and then perform a task that we actually desire. So we give it our Python callable, which was the function that we defined up here, which is going to log hello world. And then lastly, we have to provide the DAG that it belongs to. So we say DAG equals DAG. Okay, so now that we've defined a simple one node, one task directional acyclical graph, in order to run Airflow in the workspace, we just go ahead and we say /opt/airflow /start.sh. And if you are working within the workspace, you will find that unfortunately Airflow runs pretty slow when working in this online environment, which is why I was really hoping I could be able to get this working locally for this tutorial. Enough of that. Let's go ahead, now that we've done that and we have started our Airflow server, we can go ahead and click Access Airflow. So now we are in the Airflow interface. So as we said, we named our DAG lesson 1, exercise 1. So we have our DAG name here. Here we have the schedule. By default, it's automatically going to be 1 day. And next, we have the owner, We have recent tasks, last run, and the amount of DAG runs. In our case, we haven't run anything yet, so all of these are empty. I will show you soon how we can go ahead and actually run this graph that we have defined. One useful thing here is the code view. So we can actually see all of the code that is defined within that particular DAG. And as you can see, everything looks good. Let's go back to Airflow. We have the tree view. So we can see that we have our DAG, and it only has the one task that we defined. If you hover over, we can go ahead and we can actually get the start date, end date, and various other configurations that are set for that particular task. Let's go ahead and look at the graph view. It's very handy when you have a very large DAG created. You can see all of the individual tasks that are run. This would look a lot more interesting if we had a more complex DAG that was defined. Okay, so let's go ahead and trigger our DAG. Are you sure you want to run it? Of course I am. Alright, so as you can see now we have a change here. We can see that our DAG is running, and if we hover over here we can see that not see much at all. If you give it just a few moments, we should see eventually that the DAG has actually been successful. So we see here that we have these we have a failed section, running section, and success. Here we have scheduled, queued, up for reschedule, up for retry, skipped, upstream failed, failed, running, and success. So what we're hoping for is that our DAG runs successfully, and eventually we will get a nice little orb over here in the success column. As I said, it runs pretty slow when we're working here in this online environment. Bear with it, we should go ahead and get something here. In the meantime, rather than just slow down the pace, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go back. Let's go ahead and look at another exercise here. Okay, pipelines. Alright, exercise 2. So now, as I said, that we can actually define schedules. So there are many different schedules that we can define. If you want your DAG to run daily, if you want it to run yearly, hourly, monthly, and it's very easily defined. So here, once again, we're just go ahead, we are importing our Python operator, which will run the task. We're defining our DAG. This time we give it the name of lesson 1, exercise 2. We have a start date, which this one's a little more interesting. So we're actually having a start date that is going to be 2 days in the past. And we'll see what happens when we run that. So schedule interval. We're going to go ahead and set the schedule interval to daily. So what that means is that every single time from the datetime.now daily, we are going to be running our DAG. And then here, we just go ahead and we have our task ID, which is going to be the task that is performed when we are running our hello world function. So if we go back over here to Airflow, let's see if that's already in there as well. And it looks like it is. Great. And wow, that is running extremely slow. Okay, so as we mentioned, we had set the schedule to daily, and now we can see here that we have the at daily. Let's jump back here. So if we wanted to run, say, hourly, it's as simple as having that at symbol and saying at hourly. We could also define to be just once. We could also say weekly. We could say monthly. And then we could also even say, just keep it as none. And what that's going to do is this is going to default to once a day. All right. Let's see how we're doing with our DAG number 1. And it is still running like a champ there. Okay. So let's just go over this one more time. So we have our function, which we're going to run with our Python operator. We define the DAG, which takes the DAG name. We have a start date, and then we have a schedule interval. I'm going to go ahead and just change that back to daily. Then when we define our task, we call the Python operator. We go ahead and call the task ID. And then we define the Python callable, which was the function we defined, and then we give it the DAG that it is associated with. So that we're not just limited to working with Python. As I mentioned, Airflow is actually, its main purpose is so that it can communicate with many other external services. So just to kind of get a view of this, let's go ahead and look at operators. Do we have that listed here? I'm just going to go ahead and type in Apache Airflow operators. Now we can see here we have a full list of all of the operators that are available to us. We have a Hive operator, Hive to Druid, Hive to MySQL, HTTP operator. As I mentioned, maybe we were going to be doing some web scraping or something like that, taking a request from a website and then loading it into another task, which would then possibly load it into a database. So Postgres operator, this is one that we're going to be using a lot. Postgres is basically Redshift is just, as you should know by now, Redshift is just a augmented version of Postgres, and so we're going to be using this Postgres operator when we're going to be accessing Redshift clusters. Here we have S3, we have a Redshift to S3, so you can see that we have many different operators here that we can run tasks with. Alright, now let's go ahead. I'm going to jump back into another exercise here. We're going to look at exercise 3. So task dependencies. So task dependencies. So this is going to be how we actually define the path in which our tasks operate. So what I mean by that is, say we have our first task, which would be writing our hello world function. And say after that, after we run the hello world, we want to say load that information into a database. Well, we're going to have to tell Airflow exactly that the second task, which we're going to define, is dependent on task 1, which was the hello world. There's a couple ways to do that. There's a shorthand way, which we just use double carets with the arrows pointing in the particular direction, which so it'd be like task 1, right caret into task 2. But there's also another way where we could just say task1.set downstream to task2, which we'll go ahead and see here. So we're using Python operators still. And we're going to go ahead, we're going to define two functions this time. So we have our hello world, and then we also have an addition function, which is just simply writing 2 plus 2 equals 2 plus 2. Which, I mean, 2 plus 2 equals 4. And then we have a subtraction function, and then we also have a division function. So once again, we define our DAG, we provide the ID, we give it a schedule interval of hourly, and then we define a start date, which is actually going into the past 1 day. So we have our hello world task equals Python operator, and then we have a task ID, hello world. We go ahead, we define the Python callable, which we want to use, and then we want to have the DAG, which is associated with it. So I have not yet completed this exercise, so in order to do so, I'm just simply going to go ahead and I'm going to copy paste that in, and I'm going to change this into addition task. I'm going to give it a task ID of adder, and then the Python callable is going to be up here. We defined it as addition, so I'm just going to say Python callable is equal to addition. I'm going to keep the DAG the same, and now I'm just going to copy and paste this. This time I'm going to be doing the subtraction. We'll just call that subtask. Task ID equals sub. Python callable equals subtraction. Once again, keeping the DAG the same. And then we'll go ahead and just copy paste again. This is going to be the div task, division. And task ID, we're going to go ahead and call it division. And this time the Python callable will be called division. Once again, keeping the DAG the same. So to configure the task dependencies, we have two options. So if we remember, it was hello world task was our very first one. So we could simply just say hello world task goes into adder, which then goes into sub, which then goes into div. I forgot to include the task portion of it. So with that simply defined, we are now saying that the hello world task goes into the addition task, it goes into the subtask, and it also goes into the division task. But it looks like the hello world task is actually going into both the adder task and the subtask. So that would look a little bit different. So what we're actually going to change here, let's go ahead and delete that. And we also want to say the hello world task goes into the subtraction task, or subtask. But we also want to add it into the div task. Div task. So this right here is a representation of this cyclical graph. So another way we could have done this is by saying hello world task dot set downstream from adder task dot set downstream from div task. So I'm just going to copy paste that, set downstream from subtask, and then keep that the same. So these two lines of code represent this cyclical graph, and then we also have the set downstream. So another way we could have done this, I'm just going to go ahead, copy paste this, make some changes though. So here I'm going to change this to adder task, and I'm going to set it upstream. To the hello world task. But now we actually have to change this. So this will now be the very beginning of it. We're going to say div task dot set upstream. I just cannot type tonight. Of adder task. Okay, so you can see we have set the div task upstream of adder, which is upstream of hello world. So it's basically just the inverse of what we have already defined up here. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. I will go ahead and share some resources with you. I'm really sorry about that headache that I have led you down. Once again, if you do decide to install Ubuntu on your Windows machine, I really do hope that you don't run into that same issue that I just encountered. I'm not quite sure what happened. I believe it's an issue with Defender, but it's really strange because I had it working before. I don't know. I'm ready to bash my head into a wall, as I'm sure many of you have experienced throughout this course. Anyways, I hope everyone had a great night, and I will be talking to you all soon. Have a good night.